Well, hi there. My name is Sandy Allnock, and I'm here with another installment of Create in Color, my monthly coloring video here on the MFT channel. And this month I'm going to be using Critter Clan, a brand new stamp set with cute animals in it. And I was inspired by the little patterns that are on that cactus. And I got out my Copic multi-liner. This is one of the ones that's refillable, and it's a 0.2. And they also make some non-refillables that are more cost effective, so you can Google for those. And I'm just going to do different patterns inside each of the shapes. And technically, coloring in black and white is not coloring to some people because they may consider black not a color and white not a color, but black is actually an absence of color, and white is all the colors together. They kind of cancel each other out and make white. So from my science days in high school, I remember that. So it is technically coloring. So I'm coloring in shades of gray basically as I'm doing this because I'm trying to create areas where I get a darker shade because I'm using either heavier lines and heavier patterns or closer together lines, in contrast with things that are a little looser, a little spread out, so that I get a lighter shade of gray. And especially if you start to squint, you can see that there are different shades that will develop as I color this whole page. And I am going to die cut these out. I have them just on some white cardstock. After you get done with this, you could color them as well and get the added benefit of all this pattern as well as color, but I'm just going to be doing black and white cards today. I'm going to use some polka dots here on his saddle. Get those all drawn in. And then comes his schnoz. My practice one, I found that his mouth disappeared when I tried to put a dark pattern on here. So I'm going to thicken up his mouth. So sometimes as you end up looking at your piece and as you're coloring, you may find you have some things you want to adapt. Maybe you want to add another section onto the saddle. You might want to add some spurs hanging down from it or something. So feel free to use your fantastic doodling skills. I know a lot of people love to just doodle on the side of a notebook or keep a pad of paper by the phone to do some doodling on. Well, why don't you stamp some images and do some doodling in those? Because it'll be an image that you can use later on a card. You could also do stuff like this in an art journal and just do some relaxing doodling. For the mask of the raccoon, I ended up doing some stippling on the mask because I was trying to make it a dark gray. I didn't want it a full-on black, even though they wear a black mask, because the eyeballs would start to disappear. So trying to do some stippling, which is basically just dots, and I'm saving some white space around the eyes because they kept disappearing, and then it looked like he was just wearing this black mask and he couldn't see anything. So I've drawn him some white eyes around his little black dots. Just helps to give him a little more definition. And with stippling, if you're careful, you can go back in some of the empty spaces and try to fill it out. If you squint, you can sort of see where some of the empty spaces might be and get some extra dots in there and try to even it out a little bit. And his head is gray, so I used some further apart lines so that I could have a different shade of gray and it wouldn't be the same color as the mask. His mask will look a little blacker by comparison. Decided to use lines for the tail. I'm just going along the direction of the fur. So if the fur goes one way, feel free to follow right along with your pen to make the lines go that way. And then I'll do just some light stippling on his body and his legs to give them a little color, and he'll have a white belly. And I will get back to doing his nose later because I forgot to do it this time. The little fox, which I just love foxes, I wanted to have him be a little bit lighter with a gradation as it gets down further on his face, as it gets down closer to his nose. So I'm going to be getting my lines kind of tighter and overlapping them a little bit as it gets down to the center, and that will give some dimension. So you can also do dimension when doing something like this. It doesn't have to just be straight up pattern. On his tail, I'll make the darker part right at the base of his tail instead of out at the top, and let it get lighter as it gets toward that white end on his tail. And for his body, I decided to leave him some white feet because I wanted a little more contrast in it rather than filling in everything with lines. And then I'll just color in the back of his leg, and then a little bit on his body. Then the last one left is my little owl, and I apologize because my hand is just a big old fat hand that got in the way. So you can't really see much until you see what I've colored afterward, but I'm doing some very regular stippling, so doing them in a more linear pattern to get a wider apart look, so I get a very light gray that way. And then I'll use some lines to do the wings, and it'll create almost little feathers for him as well. I decided to add a little extra embellishing since he's got giant eyeballs. I just put a little bit of gray dots around his eyes and then around the bottom of his belly, and finished off the nose on my little raccoon. Next came die cutting all the pieces out, because it does have a die set that goes with it. For my card base, I prepped it by putting a panel down at the bottom that is popped. And so each one of these is going to use the same design with that popped panel and a stamped sentiment. And for my little owl, I decided I wanted to create a tree for him to sit in. There are some leaves in the stamp set. There's 2 of them, but I decided I should probably just use 1 set of leaves, or else it would be a weird tree having several leaves off the same tree. And so I've kind of placed some of these around here. This is my 0.5 pen, so I thought I'd show you how thick the line is on this one. If you use a lot of certain kinds of stamps, certain brands of stamps, you'll need a heavier line. So this does give you a bit thicker of a line. I'm just kind of making a lumpy stick. On something like this, his body's going to be covering up a bunch of it, but you can just make a little lump. Don't worry about having perfection in your drawing. And I'm going to create like a little knot in the wood with my thinner pen, and just create a little bit of a twig looking thing here, along with the branch that goes down to the leaf at the bottom. And what I realized was I planned on having him down lower, but I need him to sit on something or stand on something. So I need a little more to add to my tree. So I stamped another leaf so that there would be a little something underneath of him, and joined that up with the rest of the branch and thickened out another part so you'd have a little more to sit on. And then he's on a bit of dimensional adhesive, so now he can just sit on his little tree branch. And that is all I'm going to put on that card. Keep it nice and simple. For the little horse, I've taken the sentiment, I actually cut it. Oh my gosh. I cut a stamp. Yes, I know. Some people think that the world will end if you do that, but that's okay. The stamp comes all in one piece, so I just cut it into 3 so I could make a stacked sentiment and add grass to it. The little fox, I decided I was just going to add some little bugs flying around. So there's a whole lot of doodling you could do on these. You could doodle entire scenes on something like this, and yet still keep a really simple look to them. On this little guy, I'm just going to add a flower right beside the word you. And there you go. Really simple cards, and easy to do, but also a lot of fun, because it gets the artistic side of you out in creating some interesting patterns, as well as creating some really darling cards. You could add color to them very easily though. And that's about it from me. So here's some more videos. If you'd like to watch them, be sure to subscribe to MFT's channel to get lots more videos. And I will see you guys next month. Have a really, really great one. Bye-bye.